The 2024 Singapore Grand Prix concluded successfully last week at the Marina Bay Street Circuit, handing over one more victory to the McLaren F1 team, which is currently in a battle with Red Bull for the 2024 championships. Since the beginning of the race weekend, McLaren appeared to be the fastest team on the grid with an unmatchable performance, and the pace of Red Bull, Ferrari and Mercedes were never good enough to pose a direct threat to the Woking-based team. Lando Norris was the pole sitter for the race and held the race lead from the start to the end. But outside of that, the 2024 Singapore Grand Prix was full of battles for the track positions. We are going to talk about them in detail through this race report. Welcome back to Total F1. Before diving deep into the content, remember to hit the subscribe button and bell icon for more interesting Formula 1 videos. Teams like McLaren, Mercedes and VCARB came to the Singapore Grand Prix with new liveries, making the racetrack more attractive. Oscar Piastri had a technical issue in the rear left tyre of his car, and McLaren engineers had to make an extra effort to fix this issue. FP1 happened under daylight, and all the drivers appeared to be more comfortable with the available track conditions in Marina Bay, setting some fast lap times. Leclerc was the fastest in FP1, with a lap time of 1 minute 31.763 seconds. Behind him, Norris and Sainz were the second and third fastest drivers respectively. FP2 happened under floodlights, creating track conditions similar to race day. According to the lap times in FP2, Norris and Leclerc were once again the fastest, like in FP1. But in the end, Norris beat Leclerc with a lap time of 1 minute 30.727 seconds, being 600ths quicker than the Ferrari driver. Lewis Hamilton appeared to be unhappy with his racing setup, and he complained about it several times over the radio. Compared with FP1, many drivers were making mistakes in this session. When 2 minutes were remaining to the end of the session, George Russell found a barrier at turn 8, entirely damaging his front wing. FP3 had to be red flagged for a brief time period, as a giant lizard was running all over the circuit. Compared with the first day, track conditions were a little bit different after the overnight rain. However, Lando Norris continued his dominance with the fastest lap time of the session, being 1 minute 29.646 seconds. Behind him, Russell and Piastri were the second and third fastest respectively. In the latter part of the session, Sainz was unhappy with the grip conditions of the car and entered the pit lane to solve the issue. Alex Albon made contact with a barrier, puncturing one of his tyres. Since the start, qualifying turned very competitive as drivers of all the top 4 teams were eyeing the pole position of this race. Russell was unhappy with the grip conditions of his car, and at one point he was in danger of being knocked out of Q1. Sainz was once in the 15th spot, with the risk of being knocked out as well. Regardless, he was able to improve his lap time in his final attempt. That means Ricciardo, Stroll, Gasly and the Sauber duo were knocked out at the end of Q1. Since the beginning of Q2, the majority of drivers were setting some fast lap times, which were good enough to be the personal best lap times here in Singapore. At the end of a tight battle between these 15 drivers, Albon, Colapinto, Perez, Magnussen and Ocon had to give up on their Q3 hopes. Q3 had to be red flagged in the beginning after Carlos Sainz's heavy crash into a barrier. At the end of the lengthy delay in restarting the race, the rest of the drivers arrived at the circuit with the hope of clinching the pole position of the race. It was a very close battle to be the fastest driver of the session, and finally, Lando Norris was able to become the pole sitter. Behind him, Verstappen, Hamilton, Russell and Piastri were the fastest drivers of the session. Even though Leclerc set a very competitive lap time, his lap was deleted after exceeding the track limits, and he had to start the race as 9th on the starting grid. The front row of the 2024 Singapore Grand Prix was shared by Norris and Verstappen, who are currently at the top of the championship standings. Both drivers were under huge stress, as the victory of this event was very important to improve their position in the championship standings, as the championship is still open for both drivers. Norris showed a good reaction time at the start, converting his pole position advantage to a race lead. However, he was closely followed by both Verstappen and Hamilton. Then he slowly started improving his gap with the Red Bull driver, who was running behind him. Normally, Norris is famous for destroying his pole position advantage on most of the occasions, but this time he was successful in achieving the launch that he wanted. Meanwhile, Alonso and Leclerc went off the road next to turn 1 within the first few seconds of the race, but both were lucky to rejoin without experiencing any harm to their race. When Piastri experienced a slight understeering close to turn number 2, Hülkenberg used it as an opportunity to improve his position up to 5th, but inside the first lap, Piastri was able to retake his position from the Haas driver. Then for the next 15 rounds of the race, no major changes to the track positions happened. Since the start of the race, Alexander Albon was experiencing some kind of issue in his Williams Challenger, and his race engineers decided to retire him after just 16 laps due to an overheating issue. After driving the race for around 29 laps without any problems, Lando Norris suddenly experienced a huge lockup, directly moving towards a barrier. This was a huge mistake, which was sufficient enough to destroy his entire race. However, he managed to stop his car, giving a little kiss to the barrier. McLaren engineers called him to the pits on the 31st lap for a new set of hard tyres, and because of the big gap that he maintained with Verstappen inside the first 30 laps, Norris was able to rejoin the race without losing his track position. On the 39th lap, Piastri, who was in the other McLaren, entered the pit lane to take his new hard set. He rejoined the race once again behind the Mercedes driver Lewis Hamilton, but within less than 1 lap, Piastri was able to overtake the 7-time world champion into the 4th spot. On the 41st lap, Charles Leclerc was able to clear the Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso into the 7th spot of the race, putting his car behind his teammate Carlos Sainz. Meanwhile, Piastri started attacking the Mercedes of George Russell, who was running 3rd on the 45th lap. He came very close to the Mercedes driver with the help of DRS in his first attempt, but he failed to complete that move successfully. However, Piastri made it successful in his second attempt, giving the opportunity for the McLaren team to complete the 2024 Singapore Grand Prix with a double podium finish. Within the 10-lap gap between the 41st and 51st lap, Leclerc was able to improve his track position up to 5th by overtaking both Sainz and Hamilton. A puncture in his car forced Kevin Magnussen to retire at the end of 57 laps, and it was the second retirement of the day. By leading the race from start to end, Lando Norris was able to cross the finish line as the winner, without experiencing a considerable fight from any of the rival drivers. Sandwiching between 2 McLaren cars, Verstappen finished the race as second, and Piastri occupied the last podium spot of the race. After losing his podium position to Oscar Piastri in the latter part of the race, George Russell completed the Singapore Grand Prix as P4. Despite his poor qualifying, Leclerc was able to improve his track position from 9th to 5th at the end of the 62 laps around Marina Bay. The rest of the point-offering spots of the race were occupied by Hamilton, Sainz, Alonso, Hülkenberg and Perez. Meanwhile, Williams rookie driver Franco Colapinto lost the opportunity of scoring points in back-to-back races by a slim margin as he completed the race as 11th. With those results, Norris was able to reduce his gap with Verstappen in the Drivers' Championship by 7 points. However, Verstappen is still in the lead with 331 points, and Norris is behind him with 279. Perez's continued failure in this race as well helped McLaren to improve their lead over Red Bull up to 41 points in the Constructors' Championship. After a month-long break, Formula 1 is ready to race in the United States on October 20th, and this will surely turn out to be a very competitive one. What are your thoughts on the 2024 Singapore Grand Prix? Share in the comment section below. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel to get more exciting Formula 1 news. And we'll see you in the next video, guys. Goodbye.